episode of the Clarion Costs podcast, a cost series covering all elements of quarter protection costs, budgeting costs and litigation costs. To find out more, please look out for the January newsletter. Here with me today we've got Stephanie Kaye, and in the first episode we'll be talking about the new e-bill. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So, the new e-bill, what are your initial thoughts on the new e-bill?
I personally think it's great. I know there's been all over social media some kickback about it and that sort of thing, but people don't like change, do they? So I think some people don't like having to adapt to the new way of working. But I think ultimately, if you are a professional deputy or a court of protection practitioner, it will make your life easier. It does all sorts of things for you, so I think it's worth mentioning as well that it's actually more work for the costs provider, but we can't actually charge any more for it. So for the deputy in particular, it's no different. It just looks very different. It looks quite intimidating. It's in an Excel document. All the content is actually the same. It's just presented in a different way.
Right.
And after the assessment, that's when it really holds its value, because it recalculates automatically, it populates the bill summary page and the final cost certificate template.
Right.
So it does make things a lot easier after assessment, much quicker, and obviously you can read what the cost officers have typed as well, which is great news.
Always very handy.
Yeah.
And I remember the back end of last year, we saw quite a few bills being rejected. The initial e-bills that we'd started preparing because they didn't have an assets value in. Is this something that needs to go in the bill?
Yeah, it was sort of towards the back end of last year, before the e-bill actually came in, that they started asking to see the assets value. And we started including it in the bill, but obviously only if we were given that information. And bills weren't being rejected at that stage. But once the e-bill has now come in, there are a couple of extra boxes that have to be populated.
Right, okay.
And if they're not, they will be rejected. And one of those examples is the assets value. They want to know how much money that client has before they undertake the assessment.
Yeah, I suppose it's quite handy in them knowing how much money they've got to determine the outcome of the bill.
Exactly. From a proportionality perspective, it's really useful for them.
Yeah, definitely. And that goes as well for the OPG 105. I know previously in the PDF bills we didn't include this.
Mm-hmm.
Something in the e-bill that there's a box for. Should clients be filling this in? Should we be filling it in?
Yeah, I've been speaking to quite a few firms actually recently, because in the pilot there was a suggestion that the OPG 105 categories would be listed, so you had to separate your time per category, and then the SCCO would be able to see in the e-bill what was claimed per category versus what you actually spent per category.
Right.
In the e-bill now, it's not broken down by the categories, but they just can see the global value. So if your estimate was, say, £10,000 and you've actually spent £15,000, they can see that in front of them in black and white, which previously they couldn't. So that is another example of something where they will reject it if that's not populated.
Yeah.
For a general management bill, obviously, it's not applicable in applications.
Perfect. And I know you briefly touched on when the bill's been assessed, but is the process still the same? Does it get recalculated automatically? What's the process when the bill has been assessed?
Yeah, the process is exactly the same, it's just a lot more streamlined. Right. So you've got to populate an email address on the front of the e-bill, and that's who the bill will be returned to via email, which is obviously much quicker. And once that e-bill lands in your inbox, it's automatically recalculated. You can see what total value has been allowed on assessment, and the post-assessment paperwork is already pre-populated. Mm-hmm. So you have still got the 21 days to reassess if you want to request that reassessment, which is obviously done via e-filing. None of that has changed. All you have to do is the final cost certificate template, if you wish to accept the assessment, is convert that one page into a PDF and e-file that. They don't want to see the entire bill in PDF, it's just that one page that has to be exported, and that's your final cost certificate request, and then that should all go through smoothly.
Perfect. Sounds so much easier.
Yeah, so much easier.
Than having to look at what the cost officers wrote, try and work out what they've actually wrote, go through and recalculate everything. It just seems so much more straightforward, and hopefully will speed up the process a lot.
Yeah, massively.
And then sort of touching as well on the post-assessment stuff, if clients don't agree with the assessment, what's the process from that? Is it still requesting a reassessment, or is there something different they need to be doing?
Nothing's changed in that respect, so it's all still exactly the same as it was. You've got the request for reassessment, which is a really informal process, a letter to the costs officer asking them to reconsider their decision, and you've got 21 days from the date of receipt of the assessment. So that's when your clock starts ticking. Obviously that's a time limit. There aren't that many of them in court of protection, but that is one that you need to be aware of. And that process hasn't changed, it remains the same as it did before.
And you touched on date of receipt, that's different to the date actually wrote on the bill.
Yeah, I think as well, quite often people panic when they receive a bill because a couple of weeks could have passed since the cost officer undertook the assessment and it actually landing in your inbox. So it's the date that you actually receive it that clock starts ticking, not the date that's written on the bill.
Perfect, I'm glad we could clarify that one, because I know I've had a few queries myself in there's a date on the bill, if I got from this day, is it from when I received it? The clients were a little bit confused as to which date actually to go off, but from when it's received.
Yeah, the date that it's received. I think a couple of people have ended up in that situation where sometimes it can be like a month since the assessment's actually taken place.
Yeah.
I think the cost officer provides the assessed bill to a administrative team at the SCCO, and it's their responsibility then to send it out to the deputy. But that process could take a good couple of weeks. So yeah, definitely the date that you receive it is the date to go off.
Yeah, perfect. And historically with the PDF bills, clients would sign towards the end of the bill. I know I've had a few queries myself. It seems to be embedded a little bit further into the e-bill. Is there a specific place that clients need to be signing the e-bill?
Yeah, so what you really need to be careful of is you can't print the e-bill, otherwise all the functions are gone. Obviously it does all of this great stuff because it's an Excel document, which if it's printed, it can't do any of that, and the SCCO also can't accept it, so again, it would be rejected. But the certification, again, is the same as it was, it just looks a bit different. So it's further ahead in one of the tabs. I think there are 18 tabs overall, and I think it might be tab 13 that is called certification. There are two different boxes, so there's one that's pre-assessment that the deputy should sign. By sign, it literally means the typed name of the deputy. You don't actually have to add any signature or anything like that. It's just the typed name of the deputy in that box, and there's another box underneath which is post-assessment.
Right.
So you need to be careful not to sign in both of those boxes because the writing is a little bit confusing. One is pre-assessment and the other signature is post-assessment once you're happy with the outcome of the assessment. So if you are submitting it for the first time for assessment, it's just that one box that needs to be completed.
Perfect. Make sure it is the one.
Yeah, just the one box.
And then another thing we've also seen is the SCCO reference. I know we've always included the case number on the bill, that's from the court, we've always included that. The SCCO reference was something that the court used to put on when they assessed the bill. Is this now something that needs to go in the bill, the bill?
Yeah, so there's the OPG 105 estimate, there's the asset value, and there's the SCCO reference as well. They're the sort of three new boxes that need to be completed. They call it, I think, the OPG reference, which is the court number, so that's your number on your order that needs to be populated, which always was, and then the SCCO reference as well, which is their internal reference to help allocate it to the right matter. So that is new, that it has to be populated in advance. Some firms have struggled with getting hold of that information because you don't always have it, but if it is a bill that's previously been assessed, you will have that number, and it just needs to be populated. That was one of the key things, actually. I think it was just last week, the SCCO issued a document with common issues with the e-bill and common reasons for rejections that they're coming across. So they issued, I think it's just an A4 sheet of paper really, with some of the things that they are seeing again and again with issues with the e-bill and reasons for rejecting them. And one of them was that asset value, but also the SCCO reference not being populated.
So it's quite an important thing.
Yeah, I think what they're doing is trying to reject bills that aren't quite perfect. They want to get this right from the start. So rather than accepting loads of things that are 90% there, they're just rejecting everything until it's done properly, and then we all get into good habits with it, I think.
Yeah, I suppose it makes sense, doesn't it? It'd be a lot more streamlined going forward if we can get the little niggly bits right now, and then going forward we all sort of get into them habits and know what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that's their idea anyway. They are rejecting an awful lot of bills for what can seem like quite pernickety reasons, but they obviously just want everyone to get into good habits with it, so it makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you very much for giving us a brief overview of the e-bill. We hope you found that informative and useful. If you do have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with either myself, Stephanie, or another member of the cost team here at Clarion. Thank you for listening to the first episode of the Clarion podcast. We look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Thank you.